So we're discussing this evening the idea of inclusive language, something I'm in favour of. I'm not against the idea of people being nudged in the direction of using inclusive language. What I am against, though, is the means by which this example has come to our attention, and that is Twitter being used to shame, really, an employee of the LNER train service for using such horrific language as ladies and gentlemen. And what I find frustrating, as someone who is actually a part of the wider community being referenced here, is I actually believe that this can have a negative effect. I think it makes people look like we are being intolerant. Send LNER an email if you're really upset about that. But to suggest that you are, as one of these people did, that they are alarmed and uncomfortable by hearing the words ladies and gentlemen is frankly preposterous. So yes, I get the principle, I get the point, I abhor the means, and I abhor how much of a drama is being created out of this. Well, Jay Beetcher is a journalist and campaigner, and Peter Tatchel is a human rights campaigner, and both join me live via video link. Evening to you both.
Evening, Christo.
Okay, I'll start with you, please, Peter Tatchel. What is wrong with the term ladies and gentlemen, and is it right that someone tweets to the train company involved that they are alarmed and uncomfortable by the idea of those terms being used?
I think the term ladies and gentlemen is rather quaint and a bit old-fashioned, like something out of the 19th century, upstairs, downstairs. I've got no issue or problem with people using that, but I do think that if people are going to be offended, then we should perhaps err on the side of caution. I don't see any problem with just using the phrase everyone, welcome everyone. That's not a big issue. I don't think we need to always be gender specific. That's not really necessary. But I don't think that the trained person should be called out or humiliated over using that term. Obviously, it was said with good intention, and I think that person was actually being very kind and supportive to the customers and giving a very friendly, supportive message. So I think we have to balance all these things and recognize that if people are not male or female in the sense that they have a non-binary identity or a trans identity, then we should seek to respect that. It's just about respect. But I don't think anybody should be penalised or punished over it.
Isn't one of the issues, though, that the chances of someone being non-binary on a train service is so minute, and it is much more likely that the people on the train service will identify as a lady or a gentleman. I still use the term ladies and gentlemen. In fact, I was always taught by my mother that is how you refer to someone, because it's the most polite way. Isn't it a little bit absurd to suggest that because of a very small minority of people on the train that might not identify as either, that you have to change the language for everyone?
Well, I don't think it matters whether non-binary people are a tiny minority or a large minority. Jewish people in this country are only a tiny minority, but we all hopefully respect and give them the dignity and rights they deserve. So I don't think it's about numbers. But I don't see a big problem about being inclusive and using language that's inclusive. I don't see what the issue is. And, if I get called out over it, I'm quite happy to correct my language and to be respectful. And, I think that's just a decent thing to do.
Let's bring Jay into this. So if someone is going to be offended by the idea of ladies and gentlemen, if there are a number of non-binary people that there may not be any, but there may be some on the train, the number is actually kind of irrelevant. Isn't it important that no one is offended and that everyone feels included?
No, quite frankly. The problem that we have in society at the moment is we're constantly treading on eggshells, and we're constantly catering to the minority. The minority seems to have more sway than the actual majority. I don't see why Lawrence, the chap that sent this tweet, would be offended in the slightest. It's sort of acting as if the conductor had called them all a bunch of "see you next Tuesdays." And he also works in the train industry. He's on platforms every day. he must be going to the toilet.
Sorry,
they must be going to the toilet. What toilet are they using? You know, do they kick off every time they go for a toilet break? Do they want a separate toilet wedged in between, like some platform 9 3/4 for non-binary muggles? It's just baffling. What was worse, I thought, was not they putting in the complaint. It was the train company. They're just groveling apology, and we're seeing this more and more. We're seeing this from companies, so supermarkets, with different people just pandering to minority voices over hurt feelings, and just demanding that we change the way that we act, the way that we speak, our language, our culture.
But someone listening to this might be tempted to say, well, look, it's very easy for you to say that if you are part of the majority. If you've never experienced being a part of the minority, you've never experienced the exclusion that some people feel by not having inclusive language. And it might be a very small change. It might not be the worst thing in the world, but it makes all the difference to those people who've fought being a minority all their lives. What would you say to that?
I get what you're saying, but you've got to see that we can't be saying that, that there are a million different genders. And although we might see this as just, it's just a simple step, the person that put that tweet, and many, many people like him, that isn't the only change that they want to see in society. We're seeing that. I go back to the toilets. They're asking in gyms for non-binary toilets, and changing rooms. It's just beyond a joke. Where does it stop? We have all boy, all girl schools. Are they going to be asking for all non-binary schools? Are they? It's just, there has to be a point where we say, okay, enough is enough. We're seeing at the moment on social media, on TV, people saying that men can have periods. We're seeing that men can breastfeed, and I know that we've all put on a bit of weight, and some of us blokes have grown moobs since lockdown. But I'm pretty sure that the extra beer and burgers haven't made us produce milk. And yet we're seeing even the NHS pander to that. They put out a tweet the other day saying that it was they referred to breastfeeding people, not women who breastfeed. They decided to make it more inclusive. Who are they including? They're actually including people who have deluded themselves, in my opinion.
It's a good point, Peter, in as much as when it comes to, and maybe I'll be accused of being a bit sexist here, but when it comes to women, women in history have fought for their right to have their place because of, I don't think anyone here would disagree that the women have been the victims of sexism by men. Perhaps it's a vastly improved situation nowadays, but if you look at the historical context, that is the direction in which sexism has come. So women have had to fight for their place, fight for the right to be ladies and gentlemen, fight for the right to have the kind of medical care that women have needed. We've heard about period poverty. We've heard about the way in which there is reproductive discrimination against women as well. And so it might seem like just a little word to remove the word ladies, but it is part of a wider debate that Jay is referring to, where women feel like there's a perception that the rights they fought for are being slightly erased by actions like this. What would you say to that?
Well, first of all, I think most women's rights campaigners would not want to be referred to as ladies. That is, for many of them, a sexist word from the old-fashioned patriarchal past. But leaving
isn't it just
aside,
a polite? Sorry, we'll get on to the next bit. But isn't that just a polite word? My mother, like I said, has always taught me, and maybe she's very outdated, but I used to say, "Oh, Mum, look at that woman over there," and she'd say, "No, look at that lady over there." It's a nice way of referring to someone of the female sex to say that they are a lady, just as you'd say, "Not look at that man over there," or "That man told me," "This gentleman told me that," because it's just more polite, isn't it? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
It's called the women's liberation movement, not the ladies' liberation movement. And tennis has moved on under pressure from women. Tennis and other sports don't have ladies tennis or ladies rowing. They have women's tennis and women's rowing. So I think the term ladies is a red herring here, because it's not a term that most women like.
Okay, but even the word women is going.
On top of that, I mean, language evolves all the time. To say that we shouldn't fuss over this, I can understand where people are coming from, but we've always fussed over language. For example, we don't use the N-word to describe black people.
Yes, but black people never, but with respect, Peter, black people never fought for the N-word to be included and to gain rights based on the N-word, whereas women have fought for their word to be included in vital services in order to fight the discrimination they felt. So for some, whether you agree or not, it feels like a backward step to have that taken away.
Mm.
Well, no one's saying
we need to realise
we should take away the rights of women.
Just let Peter finish, Jay, and then I'll come to you.
No one's saying we should take away the rights of women. The rights of women, all the issues and rights that you talked about, reproductive rights, rights to equal pay, all those issues, they are not affected one iota by using this more gender-inclusive language. And as I said, language has evolved over the decades and over the centuries. And quite rightly too, we don't speak in ye olde English anymore, like in Shakespeare's time. We speak in modern languages and modern English language, and we use terms that are sensitive to other people. And it's simply a matter of respect. And this in no way threatens the rights of women at all.
Okay, I mean, what do you say to that, Jay? It doesn't affect the rights of women.
I would argue with that, and it comes down to identity and facts as well. We have female, we have male. If someone wants to decide to identify something else, crack on with it if they're happy. Not a problem at all. But you cannot impose that on other people, and you can't infringe on other people's rights. But let's look at some of the names, some of the ridiculous long list of names. Peter talks about this language being developed over centuries. These names, you could Google in and they change every single year. They're added to. You've got agender, androgyne, bigender, cisgender, gender expansive, gender fluid, masculine of center, whatever the hell that is, non-binary, omnigender, polygender, pangender, transgender. That's just some of them. I mean, if you had to sit there with a tannoy announcement waiting for him to reel that off, you might as well just walk home.
But as Peter says, couldn't you just use the term everyone or everybody? Morning everybody. This is an LNER service. Why can't you use that?
Well, it's going back to the principle of it all. I know Peter says it's perhaps an old-fashioned phrase, ladies and gentlemen, but it's part of our culture. It's universally used. It's understood. And it does refer to the majority of people. The vast, vast majority of people are either male, female, lady or gentleman, boy or girl. And we just need to stick to what we know. I completely understand, some people saying, I want to be included, but where does it stop? When we're going to have a million different more genders added and different people saying, claiming to be different things, and they'll want to have things changed. It needs to come to the point where we just say enough's enough. We used to have back in the day when you're a child, you go up to your mum and say, look, I'm dressed like this, I'm Superman. And they would say, yeah, very nice, dear, go and wash your face, get ready for dinner. We need to take that approach again. We need to stop taking this so seriously and allowing people, the minority voice, to have fake outrage and just attention seek. But
I refer again, though, I do take issue with you saying that. In as much as, if you've never been a minority voice, yes, I'm not into the public shaming of a manager on the train. I actually think that isn't the way to deal with this. But I return to the point I made before. If you have not been that minority voice, if you've not been the person who has been excluded, it's easy for you to say, well, look, that's attention seeking. Oh, look, you're having this faux outrage.
But how have they been? I know what you're saying, but how have they been excluded? They've been,
because they don't identify as boy or girl, lady or gentleman, man or woman.
But that's their own choice. And let's be.
No, it's not a choice. No. That's not a choice. That's not a choice.
Well, it's a choice.
Your gender identity is not something you choose.
10 years ago, Christo, 10 years ago, you would not have had these people say, I'm non-binary. They would have said, I'm male or female, or they would have, might have identified with the opposite sex. No one was saying I'm non-binary. This is a very, very new thing, and I expect it to be just one phase of many different labels and
perhaps
and
people feel more comfortable saying about it now than they used to 10 years ago because of actions like this person Lawrence. Maybe that's why.
I wouldn't say so. I think you've got to look at this. A lot of, we're even teaching children this nonsense that there's a million different genders. And it, like I said, it just goes back to the facts. There are male and female, whether, that's a completely different argument.
Well, those are sexes. Those are sexes. They're not necessarily genders.
But if, like I say, 5 years ago, even, maybe even 3-4 years ago, people were not saying they were non-binary. People could say, I don't feel that I'm in the right skin. I identify more as a woman. I identify as a male. You've got to admit, all these terms are slipping in, and more people are suddenly choosing to identify as that or be non-binary, etc. And I do think there is a level of attention seeking in place. This chap that put that on Twitter, he could have, as you say earlier, he could have written a letter. He could have done it. He could have done anything.
That part I agree with. But Peter, what do you say about the idea that, I mean, it is right in as much as non-binary, gender fluidity, it has seen something of an explosion in the last few years. But more pertinently, you can't actually, when you are making an announcement, include absolutely everyone. If we all admit, whether we like it or not, that people identify in many different forms of gender, you can't actually in an announcement include absolutely everyone, can you?
No, and that's why we should simply include or use the term everyone to cover everyone. We don't need to go into all the particulars. Everyone covers everyone. We're all included. We're all happy. But I want to make the point, going back, you say there's a great explosion. This never happened before, and this was something in the past. Going back 5 or 6 decades, hardly anyone identified or declared themselves to be gay because it was so heavily repressed, and social and public attitudes in the law were so cruel and harsh. So coming out as gay is a precursor to coming out as non-binary or trans or whatever. It's part of a process by which people who've been hidden in the shadows because of prejudice and discrimination are now making their voices heard. Another point is that I'm old enough to have been an ally and supporter of the women's liberation movement back in the 1960s and early 1970s. And many women's liberationists in that era argued that the ultimate quest of women's liberation was to transcend gender, that people would cease to be looked at as male and female, but just seen as human beings, and that being a woman would not be an obstacle or a roadblock to advancement, dignity, respect, and rights. Now, that was a very radical idea, and I think there's still something to it. And in a way, what we're going through is a new gender revolution, which again challenges these old demarcations, male, female, masculine, feminine. I think it's about letting people be who they want to be and not feeling that people have to be put into boxes. And I think those boxes don't fit with many people's reality. I think it's good that we can express a diversity of gender. That's a positive thing. It enhances all of us, and we all benefit.
Okay, I don't know. Has Jay dropped off? Oh, he's there, Jay.
No, I'm back here.
Oh, I'll just give you the last word, Jay, on this.
Yeah, thanks. I would say identity is a very important thing. You can't just say, let's scrap male and female. We have separate identities. We have different features, different characteristics, things that make us unique. People are proud to be female. People are proud to be male. We've, as you say, females have fought a long history for equality, for the right to vote, etc. You can't turn around to them now and say, can you stop being a female? Calling yourself a female, you're just a person. No, they have their own history and identity, and I don't think that anyone should be able to change that. And a list of genders should ever be able to replace or impact or change what we have in place.
All right, thanks. Listen, we're just losing you, Jay, but we'll say thank you to both of you. Jay Beetcher, journalist and campaigner, and Peter Tatchel, human rights campaigner as well. Thanks for both of you taking the time to debate whether this is all fuss about nothing or whether it is something that we need to be addressing in society.